Assalamualaikum. Welcome everybody. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent and merciful, my name is Kamal. I am working as a customer relationship manager and today I am moderating this session of webinar. Today the session we have arranged in the webinar that is regarding a very interesting topic and very informative, endometriosis and treatment of infertility. So before going towards the topic, I would like to share with you the outline of this program. First of all, there will be the recitation of Holy Quran. Then I will share the brief summary of Australian concept, and then there will be the presentation of the topic endometriosis and treatment of infertility. That will be shared by our professor, Dr. Saida Batul. At last, there will be question answer session. So, moving towards the program, I think we should play recitation. Towards the topic, I would like to share a brief history of Australian concept. Australian concept is one of the best infertility medical centers in overall Pakistan. It's been 22 years in IVF services and growing Pakistan IVF largest branch network. It is responsible for first FET baby of Pakistan and it's the world-class IVF labs delivering consistently high success rates. Its complete IVF treatment and providing the complete treatment under one roof, independently quality assured by Australian scientists on regular basis. And one of the biggest achievement that Australian concept is supporting non-affording patients through Angel Trust. It also trained the highest number of gynecologists in IVF techniques and technologies in Pakistan. Now, if we talk about this topic, that is endometriosis and subfertility. So, the one of the best name and the famous personality came in my mind. That is Professor Dr. Saida Batul. I would like to introduce her. She is a graduate of King Edward Medical College, Lahore, MBBS, FCPS, MRCOG, FRCOG, and she is the IVF consultant at Australian Concept Islamabad branch. She is chairperson of Gynes and OBIS Center at KIMS Islamabad and pro vice chancellor of Shaheed Zulfikar Ali Bhutto University Islamabad. She is a member of academic board SOGP since 2015 and chairperson of Rawalpindi and Islamabad Society of OBs and Gynes SOGP. She is the editor and journal of South Asian Federation of Menopause Societies and she is having a keen interest in academics research with more than 60 national and international publications in index medical journals. So now I would like to call Dr. Saida Batul. Please welcome her for her presentation of endometriosis and subfertility.
It's a pleasure to be with you and I hope you are receiving the presentation easily. Now that we are in the time of webinars rather than seminars, I hope it would be an interesting presentation. It's a very common problem, endometriosis. It is becoming increasingly common and one of the major presentations of endometriosis is subfertility. We all know that endometriosis is a benign gynecological disease. It affects 6 to 10% of women of reproductive age and it is diagnosed in 35 to 50% of women with pain and infertility. So there are lots of factors that we have to think about. It is the type of endometriosis, there are all sorts of factors that are important. And we need to think about peritoneal endometriosis, ovarian endometriosis, as well as deep infiltrating endometriosis. So they will all have very different presentations when we go about it. So as you can see, endometriosis can cause a lot of symptoms. It can cause all sorts of symptoms. And we need to work on various presentations that patients have. And one of the most important points that we have to think of is the basic pain. Pain is the major presentation that patients present with. And we have to make sure that they have adequate relief. Then it is not just the pelvic symptoms. Women present with systemic symptoms because endometriosis is a systemic disease. They have fatigue, they have depression, they have anxiety. Pain is there, but they often have low BMI and they have varied effects on the CVS as well. So these are very important points that we have to look into and just not concentrate only on the pelvis. As you can see, it has a lot of associations. In addition to subfertility, they are found to have more IBS, 3.5 times more. They have more PID, 6.4 times more. And when you ask and see various women, and you're in gynae practice, 83% of patients will have symptoms, and there'll be 17 to 20% with no symptoms. They may have an endometrioma, they may have some laparoscopy for some other reason. They are found to have endometriosis spots, but they are asymptomatic. But when they are symptomatic, almost 29 to 30% can be controlled. But there are some who cannot be easily controlled for their symptoms. And we are mainly talking about subfertility. And what is the best way to treat endometriosis? And that is the dilemma. When a patient presents with endometriosis, you see them in your clinic and then your heart sinks. And you say, oh my God, this is a lifelong condition. We keep on treating it. We treat one thing, something else happens. We cure one thing and then another thing happens. We treat the endometriosis, then another endometrioma falls. So there's a constant, it's like an illness that persists with you till you are menopausal. So this is a very important message that needs to get through with the patient, that this endometriosis comes and goes. It is going to stay with you. We'll try to treat your symptoms. We'll try to remove the big endometrioma, but it is possible that it will come back. So this is again a very important point that needs to be thought about. So what do we do in management of endometriosis? And this is what our topic is mainly about. In the management, most important is patient support. And unfortunately, we in Pakistan, especially the doctors and the gynecologists, we are so busy that we hardly ever have time to really sit down and listen to her, to talk to her, to talk to the couple and look into the problems that they have. And they have an issue of lifestyle modification. They need to modify their lifestyles. They need to improve on their way of life. And there are lots of nutritional things which can help them. Nutritional therapy with omega-3, with B12, with vitamin C and E, and dietary modification. Whenever you take a diet high in vegetables, low in animal fat, things do get a little better. But these are all sort of lifestyle changes that a woman has to make as a whole. But there are specific treatments that we have to think of. And that would depend on the symptoms she has. If a symptom is pelvic pain, then you have to give her analgesics. And the analgesia will vary from a simple paracetamol to maybe as high as in certain cases you may have to even give a narcotic analgesic here and there once or twice in a month. Then if she's not looking for fertility, then combined oral contraceptive pills are fantastic. Some people respond very well to cyclical COCs. As we understand, we know lots of brands are available, Pamela 28 and Milane and Yaz. These are all standard COCs and we can give them in a cyclical fashion. The other option is try cycling these COCs. Instead of having a pill-free period every month, you omit the pill-free period for 2 months and in the third month you give her that pill-free period, which can be a pill-free period or which may be iron tablets that she takes. So COCs can be given both cyclically or they can be given long-term in the tricycling fashion. Then similarly, progestogens can be given. You can give injectable forms, which are depomedroxyprogesterone. You can give a depot form, or you can give progestogens orally. You have norethistron available. We do not have MPA, which is methyl medroxyprogesterone acetate. We do not have oral preparations these days in Pakistan. So progestogens, and these usually are given continuous. You do not give cyclical progestogens. You give them continuously in high dose so that you induce a pseudo-pregnancy state and the endometriosis gets better. Then antiprogestogens have a role to play. Then you have GnRH agonists. Different ones are buserelin, so many are available. Then the fantastic, interesting thing is the oral GnRH antagonist, which is Elagolix. It is not available here, but this is an option in selected patients. Similarly, in Pakistan, we have aromatase inhibitors available, and you give them continuous letrozole for 6 months, and that assists in regression of endometriosis for a short while. Laparoscopic treatment, obviously, that is the surgical treatment of choice in selected patients. And last choice, when the patient is absolutely fed up, she's had her family's complete, or her pelvic pain is to such extent that she wants pelvic clearance. That is the last resort, and that is something very heartbreaking if you have to do it. So, as that is a THPSO that you do, and this is the kind of look that you have when you do a laparoscopy. This is what you see, everything all stuck. Ovary stuck to the intestine stuck to the tube stuck to the ovary, and all is a big mess. And as you try to proceed with operative laparoscopy, usually the endometrioma bursts because it is stuck at certain places, and the moment it is dissected, often we have the chocolate fluid coming into the view. So now we come on to the bread and butter part of my presentation, which is basically the subfertility and endometriosis. We all know that fecundity rates reduce in endometriosis, and it is related to the severity of disease. And here we have to think, what are the possible mechanisms of subfertility? Because that is, as a scientist, you always are interested in what is the reason, why is it happening? One is a very obvious reason. If you have a big ovarian endometrioma, that is a big mechanical thing lying there with all the various mediators spreading around, which is causing subfertility. Whenever you have endometriosis, there is chronic inflammation surrounding it. And chronic inflammation can cause tuboperitoneal anatomical distortion. Similarly, endometrial receptivity is because of the hostile environment of the pelvis. The endometrium becomes less receptive for the embryo when it needs implantation. So overall, there is a compromise in the oocyte and embryo quality as well as ovarian reserve. So in endometriosis, you have a state of chronic inflammation. The endometrioma and peritoneal disease, they often occur concomitantly. So there is a dysregulation of the immune system. The peritoneal fluid contains immune cells, macrophages, mast cells, natural killer cells, and T cells. And you know, the ovum is going to be released in this environment. And this is a very hostile environment due to presence of endometriosis. So there would be elevated levels of growth factors, chemokines, cytokines, and this all leads to defective folliculogenesis. And moreover, the fertilization is a problem, and implantation is again a problem because of its effect on the endometrium. So it is affecting the whole of the genital tract at every level. The oocyte and embryo quality is really compromised when a woman has endometriosis. It has been found that embryo development is slower in women who have endometriosis compared to those who have tubal disease, and that has been attributed to the altered follicular environment due to endometriosis. There is increased progesterone, there is increased interleukin 6, there is reduction in VEGF, there is alteration in the oocyte function, the impaired fertilization, the low embryo quality, and low implantation rates. They all lead to subfertility. So, another big concern that I'm sure all my colleagues, we all do practice subfertility and we see infertility patients. This is a big dilemma. Whenever there are endometriomas, you have reduced ovarian reserve. As a result, you have that response to gonadotropins being altered. There is reduction in primordial follicles. There are potentially toxic agents to the eggs in this particular environment. Why? Because free iron is the free iron that is being released in the blood that is in the endometrioma that is toxic to the environment. Long-lasting mechanical stretching due to endometrioma, this will impinge on the primordial follicles and they will be destroyed. Similarly, whenever a woman has endometriomas, she is likely to undergo surgery, and that surgery is often done to benefit her fertility, to improve the anatomy of the system, to reduce the hostility of the genital tract, but you would be removing a significant portion of the ovary as a result of dissection, the various diathermies you use, whatever you use that would further add to reduction in her ovarian reserve. So follicular depletion is a very important issue whether you operate or you don't operate. In both cases, this woman is going to have a reduced ovarian reserve. So it's a very difficult decision. Previously, it used to be very simplistic. You have moderate endometriosis, mild endometriosis, they would definitely benefit if you do surgery. Now, because of this ovarian reserve issue, you have concerns that maybe you would just destroy so many ova that later on even assisted conception cannot help her. So this is something that you need to think about. That is why we recommend in certain cases that expectant management is good management in selected cases. So ovarian endometrioma, the woman has regular menstrual cycle, we would encourage her to try for natural conception. You see girls coming in 2 months after their marriage, they're incidentally found to have an endometrioma, then enter into a cycle of laparoscopic surgery and open surgery, and then that cycle never ends. Give them a chance. Let them conceive spontaneously. Spontaneous pregnancies in unilateral endometriomas occur in 43% of cases. That is almost half of what a normal fertility is. A young couple, their natural conception in a year's time would be 85%. But if they have a unilateral endometrioma, it would still be 43%. So it is nothing to be laughed at. Please wait for a year. At least you will not offer unnecessary treatment to half of the patients whom you would be offering treatment if you start too early. But you do have a little bit of worry. Maybe ovulation is not as good if they have endometrioma. But the studies have shown that they are almost similar. Almost 50% ovulate even if they have endometrioma. If you find that you do a test of ovarian reserve, you do a serum AMH, you do her serum FSH, or perhaps you do an antral follicular count on a transvaginal scan, and if you find reduced ovarian reserve, then there is a need for early fertility treatment rather than we wait for things to go very wrong and then we decide for assisted conception and maybe then it is too late for us to help her. So this is something very, very important that we have to think about. So we would like to avoid it if woman is less than 35 and there are issues, then we would let her have a good chance at natural conception. So then we are all gynecologists and surgeons, and we really have to do surgery. So that is something that all of us gynecologists like to do. We are surgeons. And laparoscopic surgeons, again, they have a skill and they can offer so much benefit to the patient by avoiding open scars, by reducing the adhesion rates. So surgical treatment aims at restoring pelvic anatomy. So ovarian endometriomas are best managed by cystectomy, provided that the cyst is more than 3 centimeters. Do not operate if they are tiny, 2 centimeters, 1.5 centimeter cysts, and you rush in, trigger happy, you may cause reduced ovarian reserve and cause more harm than benefit. Other way, best treatment is cystectomy. There are certain people who do recommend endometrioma drainage and ablation with thermal spread, but they are definitely not superior to cystectomy. And there is satisfactory fertility outcome, but we have to be worried about the reduction of ovarian reserve as well as risk of recurrence. And this is where counseling is important. And despite being busy gynecologists, I think we need to give time to the patient, explain to her that she may come back in 6 months and again have a similar endometrioma, and that is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. She comes and says, I spent so much money, I went through so much of torture, I went through the surgery because I was hoping that I'll get a baby, and now, I've come back in 6 months' time with another endometrioma. And then, if you had counseled her adequately, she would take it in the run. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of bitterness and unsatisfied patients. Then we come on to assisted conception. The evidence of impact of an endometrioma on ovarian response during IVF is equivocal. So we really don't know that is it mandatory to remove an endometrioma before you start an IVF or HC cycle, or perhaps you go on with the treatment despite having an endometrioma, because the ovarian response is similar whether you have endometriosis or no endometriosis. The live birth, pregnancy and miscarriage rates are similar, but basal FSH levels are high. This is because of effect of endometriosis on reducing the ovarian reserve. As we mentioned earlier, it is mechanical. It is due to the free iron levels as well as inflammatory markers. Antral follicular count is similar whether you do surgical treatment, don't do it. But we do know that there is adverse impact on the quality of oocyte. When you're trying to fertilize them, you would feel that the woman who had PID or hydrosalpinx, that has been, that is the reason she's had this surgery, this particular assisted conception. The quality of oocyte is poorer compared to other women. So the question comes in, should we do surgical treatment prior to IVF? Live birth, clinical pregnancy and miscarriage rates are similar to treated in endometrioma versus intact endometrioma, but you have lower antral follicular counts after surgery and you need higher doses of gonadotropins for ovarian stimulation, and lower number of oocytes are retrieved from surgically treated ovaries. So when you read all this or listen to me, you think that surgery is a waste of time. No, it isn't. If you have huge endometriomas in both ovaries and you can identify no follicles, you would have to remove those endometriomas. But if you have a single endometrioma, rest of the substance of ovary is fine, the other ovary is fine, then there is a role of maybe deferring the surgical treatment and going on to IVF straight away. So the clinical judgment is ultimately the most important, but the clinical judgment should be guided by the latest research. Whatever comes through, I'm sure if I take a lecture in 1 year's time, maybe 20, 30 very seminal papers may have come, another meta-analysis may have come, and maybe the recommendations would be a little different. So we have to keep abreast whatever is going on, and whatever international progress is being made, we should try to make changes in our practice. As I mentioned, that similar pregnancy rates occur in women who have surgical treatment and have expectant management. Similarly, if we do a cystectomy, although that is the gold standard you do for endometriomas versus aspiration, no difference in pregnancy rates. But here I would like to just remind my colleagues, those who are working in the primary setup, please do not do endometrioma aspiration in your OPDs. And do not do this to women because they have horrible adhesions. If you do aspiration and then you go for a Clomid induction of ovulation, it is a disaster. The aspiration is basically, if it is done, the purpose is that it is immediately followed by an IVF cycle in which you suppress the ovary, in which you give either GnRH analogs or give GnRH antagonists. Aspiration is not meant for a periphery place where you have the vaginal scan, where you have the scale, and just because you're seeing an endometrioma, you drain it vaginally. No, you don't do it. Because unless you are going to suppress the ovary later on, you would have really bad adhesions. I've seen patients. I had a patient, she had an ovarian endometrioma aspiration about 5 years ago in the periphery, and then she did nothing after that. She was so happy that I've had that endometrioma sorted, and it came back in 2-3 months' time. But the kind of adhesions she had on laparoscopy, it was one of the difficult laparoscopies that I have done for various endometriomas because of the leakage of that material chocolate inside the cavity, and you're doing a vaginal aspiration. And if you do an aspiration on a laparoscopy, then you are less likely to cause harm, but the benefit is much less. So we have to think of all these things that do not do whatever I'm talking about, you do not do it at every level of care. Some things will be done in tertiary hospitals, something in secondary, and you have to learn to refer. The part of training which is most important is to learn your limits. A general practitioner has certain limits, and then they will say, I've done my best, now you have to move to the next level. Similarly, a general gynecologist would say, this is my limit, this is how much I do, but beyond this, I would recommend you to a fertility specialist. Even among fertility specialists, there will be some who are so hugely experienced that they may be doing very difficult sort of procedures that a routine infertility specialist may not be doing. So the message is, please realize your limits and do no harm. I think that is the principle of every doctor, every health professional. Do no harm. So please do not do aspiration in a primary setup. This would only be done either on laparoscopy in selected patients, or it would be followed very shortly by some advanced infertility treatment. So surgery prior to ART for the management of endometriosis associated pain is also a fact that you can try. But the message is that endometrioma more than 3 centimeters, cystectomy prior to IVF does not improve pregnancy rates or outcomes. It may remain the same, but it depends on the clinical decision, whether you can retrieve eggs, whether you can do a proper ovarian pickup of various follicles. So these are things that have to be decided in individual cases, but the messages should be right. The patient should not be under the illusion that, a magical operation is being done and suddenly she'll become extremely fertile, or the success of IVF would be dramatically better. But in individual cases, we have to make individual decisions, but they should be backed by literature review and our knowledge. So then we come on to pregnancy. When I was a medical student, I was taught that pregnancy is a cure for endometriosis, because we were told that whatever drugs we are giving, they induce a pseudo-pregnancy state, like the progesterone, we have combined oral contraceptive pills. They all induce a pseudo-pregnancy state, and they do improvement in the symptoms of endometriosis. The other cure that I learned at that time as a medical student was that menopause is the cure for endometriosis. If you have no hormones, this will regress. And in the medical part, the giving of GnRH analogs, the giving of antiprogestogens is based on that principle, that menopause cures endometriosis. Pregnancy cures endometriosis. But we know very well, nothing cures endometriosis. Endometriosis is such a chronic and heartbreaking condition that it goes on and on and on and keeps coming back. So generally, in pregnancy, there is an improvement of the condition of endometriosis, but there is a small risk of rupture of endometrioma spontaneously, and this could lead to bleeding, spontaneous henoperitoneum, infection, intestinal perforation. And as you can see, these women are more prone to miscarriages, more prone to preterm birth, so they are high-risk pregnancy. And as you can see, pregnancy is no cure. It does improve. It does improve. It disappears in 15 to 50% of women. The endometriosis may disappear. In another 34 to 65%, it would regress. But it would remain unchanged at about 25% and may even increase in size in up to 40% of women. So it is not a magical cure. Majority women do experience regression in second and third trimester, and lactation period is again a sort of a pseudo-menopausal period. They don't have much hormones. They're just secreting lots of prolactin for the baby. So they're in a hypoestrogenic state. Again, they are likely to be better. So convince your patient, do exclusive breastfeeding, enjoy this baby, and your endometriosis will regress as well. In 77% of cases, there would be decidualization of the endometriosis, and these decidualized lesions have decreased ability to implant. Pregnancy does not help in pain relief from endometriosis, and we all know that higher number of births results in lower risk of endometriosis recurrence and new lesions. We know that, but that doesn't mean that a woman produces 10 children just to protect herself from endometriosis. She has to decide on her fertility depending on her pocket and her situation and her health. Then we come on to what are the indications for surgical intervention in pregnancy? Very uncommon. You only do it if there is enlargement of endometriosis, you have suspicion of sonomorphological appearance which is suspicious, and these changes are usually due to decidualization. In my practice of more than 30 years, I have operated on one endometriosis patient during pregnancy, and we had to do it in her mid-trimester because of severe pain. She had huge endometriomas. She was lucky enough to get pregnant, and those endometriomas just caused intractable pain. And it was so horrible pain that she had to be operated in the mid-trimester, and we did very limited excision of the endometriosis because the uterus was quite big, and we gave her symptomatic relief and partial removal of endometriosis, and then she had a subsequent cesarean. At that time also we did limited removal of endometriosis at that time. So she did benefit. So it's not a common situation, and we should be reluctant on operating on endometriosis unless it's an absolute need. So I think I'll conclude by saying that endometriosis is more prevalent among subfertile women. We know that endometriosis and subfertility are causally related. They are not an incidental finding. Usually there is some cause relationship between the two. The medical treatment of endometriosis can delay conception. So please do expectant management. In young girls who are newly married, who are not very symptomatic, please give them time. Half of them will conceive. Give them time. Do not rush in with unnecessary treatments, because medical treatments cause subfertility. The oral pill will cause anovulation. The GnRH analogs will cause anovulation. High dose progestogens will cause anovulation. So you're treating for subfertility and you're causing subfertility. Do not do harm. Do think of expectant management in women with minimal symptoms or who are asymptomatic. But in symptomatic women and women with huge endometriomas, any size above 3 centimeters, surgical treatment can improve the chances of fertility. But please, please remember that surgical treatment also compromises ovarian reserve. The surgical treatment prevents progression of disease. The use of surgery before in vitro fertilization, we are not too sure how much benefit it would do, but the experienced clinician in consultation with the patient can make a good judgment and hope for the best. And it is very important, whenever you are evaluating infertile couples, evaluate both partners. We have so many women who've been married for 5 years, 10 years, their husband never had their semen analysis, and the woman has had all the treatments possible in this world because the husband insists that he's normal and he refuses to have any sort of even semen analysis done. Do not initiate treatments unless you have had both partners evaluated. Thank you very much. So we will be happy to take any questions. Please feel free to ask questions and we'll respond to them as they're coming. We've got a few. This is Dr. Ramsha, who is saying why we are giving anti-progesterone if progesterone is recommended. How can agonist and antagonist work together? I think, Ramsha, I have already answered your question. As I said, that pregnancy is a state which can cause decidualization of the endometrium in the ectopic places, and as a result the endometriosis regresses. But the converse is true, that when you induce menopause with GnRH analogs, and that also regresses the endometriosis. And same is the principle that anti-progesterone and progesterone, they have varied effects, but the result is that the active endometrium, which is bleeding every cycle, it stops bleeding. And that is how it works. I think we've covered this in the topic, endometriosis and subfertility, surgical treatment, medical treatment, but the message was that do expectant management first in subfertile couples and wait for natural conception for 1 to 2 years. And if the endometriosis is symptomatic, then we can consider treatment. But please remember, all medical treatments of endometriosis result in subfertility during the time that you are treating them medically. The factors responsible for endometriosis, I didn't touch on that because we had a very limited time. They are again, there is an association with older age, there's an association with lack of treatments. There are very many women who are fine for 10 years who never had endometriosis. And as they grow older, we find that they have fibroids, they have endometriosis. So there are lots of theories, and I think you can read them all in the textbooks.
Certificate within 1 hour.
Okay. So, are there any other questions or? This is a question that disturbance in menstrual cycle, is it sign of endometriosis? Not really. The pain, if you have severe dysmenorrhea, and that dysmenorrhea is cyclical, and it starts premenstrually, and it peaks towards the end of menstruation, and then gradually goes off, that is likely to be of endometriosis. It may be PID. But usually the endometriosis pain maximizes towards the end of menstruation because on one side the uterus is menstruating, on the other side the endometrioma is having more blood collected. So if a typical sort of dysmenorrhea can guide you towards that it could be due to endometriosis. How to treat recurrent endometriosis? I think that's a very good question. As I mentioned that mild symptoms, no desire for subfertility, we usually manage on combined oral contraceptive pill if there's no hypertension. We can even give Danocrine, we can give GnRH analogs in selected patients. Once they have recurrence, again you can repeat medical treatments. Surgical treatment, again you can do a repeat surgical treatment. But my message is, please refer your patients for laparoscopic ovarian cystectomies, laparoscopic diathermies. Please do not do open surgeries for endometriomas in the current times. It is not good. Just because you know open surgery and you can remove an endometrioma, please don't do that. There are lots of centers, there are government setups which are doing it, there are private setups which are doing it, and I think every patient deserves a chance that they should be referred for laparoscopic ovarian cystectomies and correction of their anatomy, rather than be treated in the periphery by less trained people or perhaps by general surgeons and having open laparotomies, and repeat treatment becomes very difficult. So recurrent endometriomas can be managed both medically and surgically, but please go for the best treatment available and the best place available. This is a question which is not related to our particular topic. This is related to fertility treatment, so we will not go into that. And I think this is again a very good question. Role of ovulation induction in IUI and subfertility with endometriosis. Obviously, it has a role to play, and you would like to confirm that there is tubal patency. And before you offer them IVF and ICSI, there is a role of IUI and ovulation induction in patients of endometriosis, and you do get better results compared to ovulation induction alone or just expectant management. This is again a very good question. Does all chemotherapy lead to subfertility? I think this is an extremely important point, that increasingly cancer patients are surviving. Young girls, they may have lymphomas, they may have leukemias and receive chemotherapy for those reasons. Similarly, different cancers can occur at all ages, and they can occur in women who haven't completed their family or even have not started their families. So in the developed countries, there is a very major role of ovarian tissue cryopreservation. Similarly, there is a role of oocyte cryopreservation in such patients. There were some studies which recommended that before starting chemotherapy, if you give about 2 weeks earlier, you start them on GnRH analog, then the number of active primordial follicles which are entering into every cycle would be reduced and the degree of damage to ovary can be reduced. So there is a very important factor that all chemotherapy will not lead to subfertility, but definitely ovarian reserve would be reduced. And there are different, that's again a whole big topic that needs coverage over a long lecture.
There are 4 more questions. Are you happy to take
Yeah,
them?
there are 4 more to that. What are the factors responsible for endometriosis? ये तो आप causation में जाएंगी, ये तो textbook के factors हैं, or you'll find that is something. You will get the e-certificate immediately after this webinar.
Absolutely.
So that's the good news. This particular application has been designed for you so that you get your e-certificate straight away. So good news, girls.
We can refer by calling our number, or we have.
So at the end of this presentation, they will give you the phone numbers of these particular centers, infertility centers, and if you are interested in referring them, you can refer them all over Pakistan in selected centers. Is Denocrine better than first line or COCPs? Denocrine is no longer being prescribed in the developed world, but we still have it available. It's a useful drug. It has androgenic effects, and it causes a lot of muscle pains, and it has effect on liver function as well. So Denocrine is something you can give, but I would always recommend that COCPs are far cheaper, with less side effects and less effect on the liver function tests. So I think we should be more comfortable using the COCPs, which are much, much cheaper, and a combined pill will cost her about 20-30 rupees a month, or maybe 5 rupees a month, while Denocrine will cost her 3,000 to 4,000 rupees a month, and that is a tremendous amount of money. This is again a very good question. Can we do earlier detection of endometriosis? I don't think we need to do that because we don't have any magical drugs which can reduce the progression of endometriosis. So better not to know. And if they have symptoms, then you investigate and find out whether it's subfertility, whether it is pelvic pain. But this is not really a cancer that you need to do earlier detection, not really. I would not recommend that young girls should freeze their eggs, because you're born with your eggs and you carry them till 40, 45. But I was mentioning that those women who develop cancer and need chemotherapy, in those cases, there is a role of cryopreservation of the ovarian tissue. But these are very technologically difficult things, and not many centers. I don't think in Pakistan we have any good centers who are offering that. And moreover, I think poverty is the biggest issue. And cancer is such a life-changing event that when you get a diagnosis of cancer, you hardly think of fertility at that time. It's once you're cured that you start thinking of this. But poverty is our problem. Lack of universal insurance and basically expendability of women. You have a woman who's not fertile, you get married again, you get another woman. The second one is not able to produce children, get a third one. Woman is the woman empowerment isn't there. It is the actresses, the rich women who do cryopreservation of their oocytes, who even cryopreserve their embryos after donor insemination, and then decide to have children at the age of 45 once they've had their peak careers over. We do not have empowered women. I hope we have, and I hope we can make decisions related to fertility or in cognizance with our Sharia. Sharia is very important. We are Muslims. We have to do things within that limitation. Okay, so I'll thank you all, and we'll now hand over the session to the moderator.
Very excellent information that is shared by our professor consultant, Dr. Sida Batul. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, I would like to thank you, all of you, for joining this session. And you were asking about your certificates, so you will get after an hour. And recording will be shared on all our social and official websites, so you can check the same recording over there as well. So thank you, everybody. You can also check our website www.acimc.org for more details. Thank you so much, and we will see you in future again. Allah Hafiz, take care. You can also check our UN number that is available on our website. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz, take care.